So today I'm going to demonstrate how to cut paper in various ways. So some of the things you're going to need are an X-Acto knife, just like so. I like to use a pencil that is a little bit more, lightweight as far as making marks. So I usually recommend like a higher grade H pencil. So in my case, I'm using a 6H. You're going to need an eraser, just in case you have any unwanted pencil marks from when you draw out your design. You're going to need cardstock paper, which is what I have here. And then finally, very important, the cutting surface that I'm using. This is a self-healing mat. These can be found at Blick. They can be ordered online. I've also seen them at Michael's and Joann's, but Blick is usually the best bet for that kind of thing, and you'll probably get the best price for buying one of these self-healing mats there. I have a lot of these in my studio, and I highly recommend them. I use them all the time whenever I'm going to do cut paper work. So, what's great about paper is it's an accessible material. It's one that, once you kind of get used to working with, you can do a lot with it. You can definitely use it in a way where it's a little bit more structural. You could also use it where it kind of makes like net-like structures. In fact, I have a drawing I just completed. It's not adhered together yet, but I like doing a lot of layered cut paperwork. So what I did here was I created my drawing and I wanted to cut the doily pattern out using the negative space. So I went through and did that with design so you can see them kind of coming apart here. But whenever you cut more into your paper, what's going to happen is, you're not going to have as much strength. So if you want your paper to kind of be like a little bit more net-like, or if you want it to be a little bit more loose, that's when you'd cut more into it. So, it kind of makes like a net-like structure. So whenever you're working on doing your designs, I find it very important to draw really lightly for whatever you're planning on cutting out. Now, for our paper project, one thing I'm going to encourage people to think about is, how do your parts go together, right? So, one thing you might want to consider is doing something like making tabs. So, I'm just going to freehand draw a design, but I have also provided templates for different shapes, such as cubes or pyramids, in case you have anything that's, super specifically geometric. And those designs actually come with those tabs built in. But I'm just going to make something up and freehand it, and I will show you how to do some tab work. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just very lightly draw in my design. So I'm making a little tab here. And the reason why I want to draw light is because in case I have any marks on my surface, when I'm making my paper sculpture, I want to be able to erase them pretty easily. So that's the point of why I want to draw on the lighter side. So that's how I'll approach that. So I'm going to do two geometric shapes here and cut those out and show you the best way to go about cutting those. Okay, so I have my design. Again, I went really light, so that's why it might be a little bit harder to see on the screen, but it is two hexagon shapes, and I have tabs in there. I'm actually just going to draw one more little tab just so I have it here. Okay, so now let's get to the actual cutting part. So one of the most important things when you're doing any cutting work is you have to absolutely know where your hands are. So, if you're about to make a cut, you want to make sure your hand that's stabilizing the paper is far away from where you're doing actual cutting. So like I would put my hand, here on the further edge of the paper and, say I want to make my cut right about here. I would do that so that way my hands are really positioned far away. So that way I don't accidentally cut my fingers. One of the most common injuries in usually sculpture classes or anytime, you're having art classes is usually with something like an X-Acto knife or a utility knife, or another big one is if you're in printmaking, the cutting tool for linoleum. And the main reason why people get those injuries is because you're really not positioning your hands properly. So making sure you take the time and you're being self-aware of where your hands are is extremely important. So again, my hands are pretty distanced from where my cut is going to be. Now, another important thing to check is whenever you're doing any cutting, you want to make sure you have a nice sharp blade. You can tell if your blade is dull if you have a lot of resistance when you're cutting. Also, when you're peeling your paper away, you're taking, you get some pilling. And usually that pilling is an indicator that your blade needs to be changed. So if you're planning on doing a lot of cutting work, I recommend getting just a small box of blades so that way they could be changed out whenever you notice your blade is getting dull. So making sure you know where your hands are, making sure you have a sharp blade, really important things. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to cut out the rest of my design here. So, and I'm just going to take my time, follow those lines, and I'm putting a good amount of pressure down into my mat. The nice thing about these mats is you don't have to worry about accidentally putting cuts in your table surfaces, say if you're working from home or another studio, depending on your situation. So this is just a good way to kind of create a working surface. Okay. And the other thing you can do too is if you have a lot of straight lines in your design, you can also use a ruler just to secure where those lines are and then run your cut. Now, another important thing with my piece, so first I'm going to pop it out. So that popped out really clean, as you can see. So that means that, my blade is good. So that worked out really well. But, say I want to do some folding or I want to, establish my tabs. What are some ways I can do that? So what you can do is you can use a method that is called scoring. And what scoring is making a cut in the paper, but without cutting all the way through. And what's nice about scoring is it creates a line that's really crisp, and I'm sorry, a fold that's really crisp, and it makes your design look really clean with the paper. So what I'll do is I'll show you the difference between a scored line fold and a regular folded line fold. So let's start with the regular one that everybody would be familiar with. So basically I'm just going to take a couple ends of my paper here and just gently fold them. And you can use, sometimes I like to use just kind of like the edge of, my knife here, just to kind of, make that crease a little tighter if I'm doing a fold in that manner. You can also use a tool called a boning knife, and that's basically like a blunt knife, and it's meant to create folds in a surface. So, that's one way to make a fold. So this is how I made like a little tab here. Let me show you the second way using scoring. So we'll flip the piece of paper over a little bit, and with scoring, again, what you're going to do is you're going to just really lightly go through and make a cut in the paper, but you're not going to cut all the way through. That's the key. Then you're going to gently work the paper back just like we did with the last one. And again, I like to use carefully use the edge of my knife here just to kind of establish that fold a little bit more, you know, but you can see here it's a little bit more crisp in comparison to here where it's a little bit more rounded. So, you know, if you want that really crisp edge, that's how you do it. You would score it. You know, and it works well for just doing general folds too. So I'll do the middle here. So I just scored that. And then again, I'm just going to gently work the paper just to get that crease. And okay. So now, you know, my paper is a little bit more flexible and, you know, I'm able to really make those folds. And what's nice about using tabs in particular in your design is it makes things really easy to kind of fasten together. So like so, you know, if I wanted to, you know, glue these parts together with my design, those tabs make it easier just to kind of secure things. So, and again, I've provided various examples for all of you as far as templates. So you could even print out designs on your cardstock paper. What I would recommend doing is using, like, if you can convert the black to a gray so that way it stays light, or you know, make sure the paper's flipped over because you don't want those black outlines showing through on your design unless you're planning on, you know, addressing the paper, or if you decide to use a different kind of paper, like, you know, if you want to get colored cardstock or anything, I would definitely recommend that. I wouldn't recommend necessarily painting it because what's going to happen is the moisture from the paint is going to make it want to warp. And if you did want to paint a surface, it would be better to use a thicker paper like a Bristol. Now, with the kind of paper we're using, you're definitely more than welcome to address the surfaces too. So, you know, I happen to have Copic markers that I use a lot in my work. So markers or any like drawing tools could work really well because you can go ahead and, you know, embellish the surface if you like. You know, so I'm just going to do a couple little things just to kind of play around to give you all some ideas. But yeah, you can definitely decorate the surface of your pieces. And, you know, if you want to add that other layer to it, it could be really interesting. But, you know, you can definitely do something like that as far as your paper project is concerned.